That sounds great. We're all about organic conversations around here.
Absolutely. I love it. Hey, man,
Yep.
it's so good to meet you. Thank you so much
You
for
too.
taking a minute out today. I
Thank you
appreciate it.
too. Appreciate you.
You bet. So let's begin our journey into your work by asking you this. 6 years ago, this pandemic changed our lives and world. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you do things today?
Well, we were traveling. I was traveling. My wife and I, in particular, were traveling to Switzerland. We were traveling to Turkey. We were in all kinds of locations, and we were teaching and training. We were doing workshops, and organic intelligence teaching was really worldwide and everywhere from Japan to Hawaii and up in the north and all over. So, pandemic hit, and it really worked for us because the traveling gets old, jet lag gets old, and also we had already begun to put our teaching and training online, and so that just lit the fire to as we realized it's a necessity now that our trainings have to go online. And
Yeah.
so we did. We just went online and we began to actually increase our reach, because online the world is your oyster, the world is your market. And so we weren't just localized, but what I was afraid of was that all this personal contact and the personal relationships that we had, that would suffer. And there is some of that. Like I really miss seeing, people in Switzerland and my friends that are there. And there's nothing like, an Italian coffee and stuff. There's legit stuff that I miss. And for us, the teaching and training got the best ever. And we'll, in some ways, never go back. We'll probably go hybrid, with some in person and some online. But what we have now is instead of 6-day intense formats, we have information coming every day in like little 5 or 10 minute videos. Super assimilable, super easy. The repetition is there, and so all of it is happening in that way. And so it is the best. We're getting the best results from this training in my like 20 plus year history of training.
I know that when I was doing therapy sessions with my son during that time, I was so relieved that we could do it remotely because you have to go, there was a part of us that had to get prepared, drive, go there, leave, all of those things. And there's a level of, I think we realize human beings and having that interaction is essential, but I think there's other things where you can get to the marrow of the matter by doing it remote.
Truly, and it became much more affordable for our clients. You don't have, like you said, you don't have the travel expense, you don't have the lodging, you don't have, the location expense. It just became much more accessible in just about every single way. And, sitting down with my friend Martin Schlotzer and having we would get a roast chicken every Thursday from Benny's Poulet, there in Basel, Switzerland. And so, yeah, I miss some things like that,
Yeah.
but we'll go back and see Martin.
For sure. So let's get to the heart and soul of the good work that you do on a daily basis. And to do that, I'm going to put you in front of 12-year-olds. They are a truth serum. One of the kids in the back of the room at Career Day wants to know what you do for a living. How do you
Yeah.
synthesize and explain that to them?
I help people find their own genius. I help them find their own teacher, their own wise person who is giving them secret messages all the time. And I just help them understand the language of those secret messages that say, you're okay, or that say, I just feel your fingers right in your hands right now. They're rubbing each other. That's a nice thing. Or feel the nodding of your head right now. Or maybe you have an image of grandma right now. Do you remember your Christmas tree? And all of these messages are coming from inside, and I help people hear them and feel the love that's behind them. And when you feel supported and loved, you understand like everything really can be okay.
I've written poetry my whole life, and I always find that going back to memories like that is such a cathartic wash. It will regrow synapses where they were broken before and do things when you can go back to those really good memories.
Oh, that's so true. Thank you so much. I'm just that just is. I feel that as an invitation, and I just think of images like of my own grandmother, or some really powerful. And this is a means to an end for us. This isn't the end game. Like, oh, now I'm just going to always think of grandma, and I'll be happy and I'll live a good life. But in fact, what it is it's increasing the intensity of our inner experience. It's excitement, it's joy, it's love, it's those gratitude, but still, from the biological standpoint, it's arousal. And what I figured out by training professionals in trauma treatment somatically for 17, 18 years is that you don't need the negative intensity of like recall of what went wrong, what happened, what the trauma was, what the family situation was. You don't actually need that. That as I begin to listen to people, I began to recognize that that messaging of positive support is the intensity that the system needs.
Yeah.
And so I just train people to watch that intensity and it grows. If it's reflected back to the person, like, oh, you just had that picture in your mind of your grandma. And then they go, yeah, I see her on, oh, I remember her big hands and how she would hug me. And she's kind of big and it was a little uncomfortable, but it was completely enveloping. And then they may have a tear or two. And step by step, the intensity just like that will come up. And that's the secret of growing how we can experience intensities of all kind. Like our system is built around thermostats or set points of intensity, and we can grow that, but we grow it through positive intensity, not the negative. And that's the rad discovery of organic intelligence.
My dad, when he passed in '08, he left behind, without knowing it, he left behind his life story in audio. And I just happened to catch it in his drawer. Like it was literally going through stuff no one knew. I put it in and I'm like, wow. So he was born in Brooklyn in '43, I believe. And anyway, so he goes through his life. And there was one memory when he was a kid. His grandmother would cut a yam in half. And she came on the boat from Ellis Island from Italy. And
Oh,
she
yeah.
cut this yam open and cooked it for him. And he got real emotional on the tape. And he never told me this story. And I think about that when you bring up grandmothers and all of that, like all of the things that he would talk about that went wrong in his life. That was the one memory that I would have loved to have him tell me. And he is in another realm. But to hear that and to see that, I can just see him sitting there. He kind of looked like Spanky from the Little Rascals, just
Right?
sitting there waiting for that yam to come down and the love they shared. It's like those things. It's so
Ah,
cool, you know?
yeah. How did he get the idea? Did he just sit down and start recording?
He was spooked by someone that he knew that passed, somebody in his life. He was at that
Yep.
age. He was in his mid to upper 60s and he was like, I just don't want to leave this planet without my story being left behind. So he had the old like Radio Shack cassette tapes and I converted it to digital and preserved it and got it all, ripped down. So it was I mean, I
Wow.
just it was wild that he did that. It's such a gift, because there was so
That's
much
so
stuff.
yeah, right. Coming out of Italy and the whole
Yeah.
immigrant story and then grandma. This is gold for
Yeah.
your family, for generations.
Yeah.
And thanks to the fact you digitized it also,
Yeah.
it's going to be there forever as a
Forever.
resource for your family.
It
That's brilliant.
it's fun,
Good,
man.
good on him. Good
Yeah.
on him.
Oh,
He
absolutely.
loved y'all.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. When you
Yep.
were 12, let's go back to the classroom. What did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream gig?
Oh man. Let's see. That would have been like sixth grade, something like that. I have always been someone who cares about other people, and so my mom and dad, they were a little concerned. I grew up in Kentucky,
Yeah.
and my both of my family were like Depression era, rural farm, dirt floor kind of folks, and they're like, Steve, you got to look out for number one now. Don't forget that. And so I think they were a little concerned that I was overly like invested in how other people were doing. But that was in there somewhere. I don't know if it was going to be in the medical profession or counseling or being a pastor or what, but it was somewhere in there where I felt like what was meaningful was being of service.
So, who's been your hero? Who's been this inspirational force that's allowed you to have this big heart, this emotional intelligence, to get to this point where you found your place in the world and what you need to be doing?
I really it was the artfulness of my family, and I think especially my mom and dad. I'm a teacher. My dad went to the University of Kentucky on the GI Bill, was becoming an agriculture teacher. His dad was a teacher, so there's all this education and in a really subtle way, like they realized, like we're just going to put those kids in a healthy environment. And just like seeds in fertile soil, they'll grow.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't a lot of like bossing us around telling us what to do. They just gave us opportunities that were going to be helpful. So singing in the choir at church, or finding a church that was big enough that had like good staff and lots of activities and stuff to keep us out of trouble. And so and helping out in sports. I played a ton of sports, and my dad would throw baseballs to me to hit and stuff. And there was just a lot of opportunity of context. And I think that's really rare. I remember him telling me a story. He said he was out late one night. He'd been in the military, so he was a Marine in the Eastern Front, and so he'd been out late one night, and he had come back home, and he had been out late, and his dad comes in, didn't say a thing about the lateness or about what maybe he was doing, and then said, "Well, Willard, time to get the fence posts up." And so it was just early, and they went out and they set fence posts for the better part of that day in the heat and the sun. And he got a message from
Yep.
that, but it wasn't that direct message. It was a context. It
Yep.
was just a place where there was a lot of love and connection.
I remember when I was a kid, I left a message on someone's answering machine. And I was a kid and I was getting egged on and I was trying to impress the older kids in the room and I got in trouble. And I
Yep.
remember I was at the swimming pool and I was coming out of the deep end. I just jumped off the diving board and I look up and I see like these two shiny shoes in front of me. And I look up and it's my dad. He's never was around for those activities as a kid. And I just looked up and he just said, "Get out." That's it. That's all he said. And I
Yeah.
knew, I was like, "Uh-oh, I don't know what I did," but I got
Yeah.
out. But it was those things. And he
Yeah.
didn't lean in, and because, he was an older Italian guy, so he could get verbose. But at that moment, it was just get out, and
Yeah.
and that was it. But those messages, those can be more powerful than anything else.
Right.
Silence can be the most deafening thing on the planet sometimes,
Totally, totally.
you know?
And that message got clear and memorable to this day. There was a lesson that was
Oh,
learned in that.
yeah, it was like two little Darth Vader heads because he was a car salesman and those shoes were so shiny and it was like, get up. It was wild, totally wild. So I'm curious, if you could meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, would you like to meet anybody and sit down and have a lunch and that might help you on your journey?
Oh, totally, totally. It would be hands down. It would be like somebody of the caliber, and there aren't many of them, like the Dalai Lama,
Yeah,
something like that. Somebody who has trained in wisdom and mind since he was what, four,
yeah.
five, something like that. Who is trained like that. He says amazing things like, "Oh, my religion is kindness," a message for us all. But behind that is this scholarly and relational and political and spiritual training of such depth. And there are people that I've been with, and you probably too, that where you're just with them and just being with them is transformative. I remember being at a conference, a therapy conference, and we were listening to Carl Whitaker, who was a family therapist, and and one of the persons I was sitting next to, they said, I could just listen to Carl Whitaker say his ABCs and I'd be
Yep.
transformed. And it's like that, just recognizing there's real development of being that is possible and that transmits somehow. And I've had that experience. And so being with somebody like that, not just what he might say, but how the feelings, begin to move in the midst of being in the presence of somebody that kind of evolved.
I love that because, being a jazz radio, I'm fortunate to interview such towering figures that have a different chloride level in their blood. And I remember
Yeah.
David Amram, and he was relaying stories about hanging out with Kerouac in the early days in New York, and how
Yeah.
when they'd have house parties, Kerouac would always be talking to the guy that was like cleaning up the apartment, or he was always off with people that he just didn't really care about the societal, just the status symbols. He was just the
Status.
guy.
Yeah.
But him, David, is an impenetrable ray of light. Like everything that comes out of him is deep, positive, it's grounded, and even if it goes into a place of exploring the darkness of humanity, he molds it in a way where you feel absolutely uplifted. I remember getting off of that interview and I was just like, I just couldn't believe what I went through. And it'll happen. There's been certain transformative figures that are just, they've amassed such an emotional and intellectual capacity that's
Yep.
almost godlike, that it's just like a Coltrane song on 11. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, that's crazy.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Wow. Well, we think in organic intelligence, we think that has to do with biological synchrony, like the coherence of an individual, also biologically. And we think that by getting the feedback, it's like when you go to a jazz club and the band is playing, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, something else is happening now. Like they found the groove. And there's some intangible moment of transcendence that emerges. We see that little by little in the physiology of people we work with. And by reflecting those moments of being in the groove over and over again, the biology grows its capacity and we grow our processing capacity. That's a very similar idea. And I love jazz too, by the way.
yeah, well, I moderated a Q&A with the headhunters this summer, and Donald Harrison was there. He taught John Batiste, he taught Biggie Smalls, taught all these people in this huge compendium of like musicmanship. And at one point he said, when you're up there and you're with all of the cats on stage and everybody's in the crowd, it's like you slip into heaven. You slip into this place where you let it all go like a good movie, and you
Yeah.
enter this place. And when he described that, the way he described it, the way he was like, you get washed over. I think about this modern era of absolute buffoonery we're watching and
Yes.
living through, where we
Yes.
all need that level of like cathartic elevation. We need this level
Yes.
of us to wash away, as Louis Armstrong said, or Duke Ellington, the sins of the day, so we can feel it anew, feel jazz.
Oh,
That
yeah.
needs to happen. And the way Donald explained it, there's nothing more seminal in this modern era we're living through than having art transform us into a place of healing, because we need it
Yeah.
more than ever.
Oh, that's so good. Right. And you pinged one of our major concepts. And it's not just we say that the plan is improvisation. So it's not just that, but that when you find that groove and when you get washed over by that sense of heaven, that it's a non-conceptual space. It's clearly not, it's rational, but beyond rational. And it's really what we begin to talk about as non-dual. It's like everything just fits together and you have this particularity and you have the big picture all at once. So that's right up our alley. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you this. If you were to have a dream tonight and ran into the 18-year-old version of you, and you walked in a room and there was a projector and you clicked a button and it showed a 60-second highlight reel of the life you've lived so far, would that young version of you believe that you lived this life so far?
No, for sure not. At 18, I was really lost, and I carried on with that for quite some time. But thankfully, I just have had really great teachers. I have had really good mentors, and these teachers and mentors have all been in the healing areas, and they have generously given to me to create a path where I could function, and then not only function, share it with other people.
You know, the one thing that's beautiful about this life is that there might be strangers or people that aren't in your life for a long time that do something kind. Do you remember a moment like that, maybe in your early days where you were lost trying to get your balance, where someone did something genuinely nice that changed the trajectory of your path?
There's so many of those touches. I was working at an inner city health clinic in Washington, D.C., and the director, I was just, I was out of college. I had nothing, I could do some administration. So I was typing up thank you cards for people making donations. And I remember like going, hey, thanks for your gift and Merry Xmas. And Alan Getchus came in. He was the founder and the executive director. And he brought back this card and just said, hey, Steve, I wonder if you'd spell out Christmas here. Like, don't leave Christ out of Christmas. I said Xmas. And it's like, oh, yeah. And again, just a subtle moment where he could have been rude about it, but he did it. He gave me a teaching that was like wrapped in kindness. And we didn't have much relationship really, but he was the executive director and I was this kid back in the back room typing up thank you cards. And he didn't have to come down and provide a gift. And he did. And the reminder was be kind and be generous. And the message, the way that comes is by somebody being kind and being generous. So it's just over and over again like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone you work with, everyone that knows you in all these different realms, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Uh, you know, um, the thing that I would wish that people would know is that the kindness that they hear, the love that they hear, the affection that is offered is real. Everybody thinks it's all about such a transactional thing, and so that's my also perception is that what I'm doing really comes out of sincere like love and I that's my perception and also what I would love for people to be able to accept because people are going, I don't know, what is he trying to sell me, another course or something, and there's so much more to it than that. So that's what I think.
I love it. So if anyone wants to take the next step, they want to dive in, they want to hire you, they have questions, any of the good business, where's the best place to go?
Organicintelligence.org. That's our website. There are courses, classes, information. So we're Organic Intelligence, and that site is organicintelligence.org.
Excellent. Perfect. I will put that in the show notes. What a joy. It's been so great to be able to hop into your orbit for a little bit. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure and wishing all the best for you as well. Congratulations on all.
Thank you. Same to you.
Yep.
And